in 1939 was the first movies taken, and we were very grateful to the Nelson boys, Lynn Stewart and Stuart McIntosh there, painting the hull of the old camp boat. And there's Lynn Stewart walking around the boathouse, and we've now arrived up at the camp. This is probably the first trip made of any of the boats up into the camp. And this is the pile driver came in there to put in the piles for the new wharf, and of course Stu McIntosh had to go to the top of the pile to examine it and see that everything was in order. He had no intention of diving off, but that is the government boat there that brought in the pile driver, and that shows the tall pilings that were put in, and everybody wondered why they had to be so tall. And pictures a little later on will show when at high water in the lake there wasn't much of the piling left. Here we have fellows waiting in the dock in Nelson, ready to go up. That's the McIntosh boat, did a lot of service, and that's Bill Affleck, one of the early members of the camp, and spent his war years, and then he's worked in Ottawa and is now living in Victoria. And then the other chap there is now Reverend Bob Morris, Dr. Bob Morris, and they were going up there to open up the camp on that particular day. So it was every spring the boats had to be painted, repaired, put in shape for service at the camp. And here we have some of the changes that were being made to the cabins. Shakes were taken off, and here's the ever welcome train coming into the camp, bringing campers in from the East Kootenay. We had all the, I think nearly every camper that came in from the East Kootenay, their parents worked on the railroad, so they came on the railroad passes. And this looks like an umpire that didn't do very well in a ball game is getting his just reserves for not calling the shots quite right. This wasn't a customary thing. This is only done by fellows who knew exactly what they were doing and who they were doing it to. Field sports in camp, and the interesting thing about this picture is that these fellows brought senior boys camp. The fellow taking the ride there is Bill Dimock, and he ended up went overseas as a hockey player for Sudbury. There we have well-known three-legged race. There's Garth Barnes, Bart Dimock, Bob Morris. This is a back-to-back race. Softball. That was before we tried to level the ball field playing the ball. And the interesting thing is the railway track showing there is no longer visible because of the foliage growth up alongside of it. And these cabins here, there were 3 cabins built, 1, 2, and 3 built by before 1934 or in 1934. And some of those, the last of the boys that worked on those cabins died down in South Africa about a year ago. Harry Parker. The lake might be cold, but the boys always enjoyed their swim. The log cabin was built in 1934. This is the boys decided to put on their own fashion show, and this is some of the fashions that appeared during the boys' camp. I think that is Doug Winlaw of Nelson. His pants kind of got ripped open. This is a mixture of shorts and long johns. Frank Padden, worn out the back end of his pants. Bob Morris was the flunky, had his alarm clock there. Cammy McKenzie from Rossland. One more rip in his pants didn't matter. He didn't know whether he had a hula skirt or not. Next fellow, they had trouble getting him out, but he finally came. All he had on was his shorts, and that is Jack Hand. Here's a group of the senior boys at that time. Bob Morris was the flunky, and he's just getting up to go to his chores first thing in the morning. He always decided he had a little exercise and then get back into bed. Always quite the thing to go up to the railway track to wait for the train to come in, see if there's any mail on it, but this train is coming from the east. Here's 7 o'clock in the morning. The boys are routed out of their beds and they're heading for the flagpole for a morning roll call and a morning exercise. And after they've had their exercise, they have the choice of going down to the lake for a polar bear swim. And incidentally, the Polar Bear Club has been going for 60 years out there. They still do it. This is a whittling club, and here they're making string belts. Making cord belts. That fellow there making a belt is Keith Jamieson, and that is Ernie Ball, who is now a tour director. Finished his career as a high school teacher and principal, is now a tour guide. Here we have Reverend Bill Selder, who was at Ymir. Reverend Bill Selder very nearly went into professional hockey rather than the ministry. His little son Bernard. There's Billy Horner. Baseball was a very, very popular game. Rain or shine, they would go out and play, never miss a game. Here's another invention of a sports day. I think this is a junior boys camp. I'm not just sure what that relay is called, but they think up their own relays from one camp to the other. This looks like departure. Some of the boys heading for home, waiting for the train to come in. This is Dr. Endicott. He was going to make a, and that is the Moyie going back up the lake. It used to come down every weekend for boiler wash, and so it was always quite a thing to see it go past the camp. And on one occasion it was going by, we were at chapel service and Pop Smiley was conducting the chapel, and he called a halt. He said, "Boys, look out to the lake and look at that scene there." He said, "You may never see it again." And he was right. That was the last trip of the Moyie up the arm. It's now up at Caslow. There's a museum. That light is on the camp boat that we had at the time. We're going up the, they called it the Yoo-Hoo. And the reason it was called the Yoo-Hoo because if it was out on the lake, everybody was Yoo-Hooing it to come in and get them to take them someplace. Stewart McIntosh, who ran the camp boat for quite a while. This is a young people's camp. There's Joyce Maidment and Dr. Lee's at the back there. and L.C. Robinson and Margaret Goddard. And this was exercise in the young people's camp. That's Wolf and Eliason, and that Margaret McCloud and Joan Harrison, Carl Swanson, Bert Green, Elsie Robinson, Mary Heddle in the back there. This is a young people's camp. It was this was an act that this was a dramatization taking place in the camp. In Joyce Maidment and Fred Robbins. Joyce Maidment was a beautiful singer and won many music festival programs in the West Kootenays here. And this is where he's taken off for prison by Alice Goddard and Margaret McCloud. It's Joan Harrison, and she was taken captive and fastened to the door, and Bob Kay came to her rescue. This is Alice Goddard, who was also very prominent in the young people's camp at that time. That's somebody says a dramatization such as we did there, wouldn't think it would. So it was being worse than what we're doing there. Carl Swanson, now retired, living in Nelson. And this is, the poor gal was captured by the Indians and Bob Kay to rescue. This is on the way out one day. We spotted a fire. This is just by brilliant bush fire started. This is the old McDonald packing house. A lot of cherries and apricots were shipped from that onto the lake steamers going up and down the lake. And of course, we profited by the use of their dock and so forth. That is Donny Kettlewell and Joey McIntosh showing off his bridge thing. And that tank was to have been our water tank at the camp. We got the bright idea that we would take it across on the ice with the narrows, and it didn't freeze up for 2 or 3 years. And by the time we got around to it, it was shot full of holes, and we never did get it over to the camp. This is Mrs Stromme. This is Claude McIntosh, who used to live in East Trail. 2 McIntoshes there, not related. Eileen Harris. Wash day in the girls' camp. Elva Kettlewell. Without Elva, I don't think the camp would ever have got started. She was a powerhouse in her own. She could conscript more people to work for that camp than anyone else. And this is in the girls' camp. This would probably be 1941. That's one of the Ratcliffe girls, and that's camp director. Clean house had to be the thing here in the boys' camp. There, Doug Winlaw supervising the job. Earl Dwyer and Claude McIntosh. That's Mrs. Fawcett. This is again in the girls' camp. Beds were never in the right cabins when the girls' camp came in. They always had to be shifted from one place to the other. in the girls' camps, we had quite an array of leadership. Nora Alice was an excellent teacher. Gertrude Patmore became a church worker in Victoria, and Ruth Lundy was expert swimmer, and Helen Staples, Peggy Sproul. They were all exceptional leaders. Earl Dwyer, he stayed out there in the camp to work on cabin 4, and the other fellows decided to come home. Bruce McKenzie there, and left poor Earl out there by himself. He said he was never so lonely in his life, spending 4 days out there all by himself. This is over at McDonald's Landing. There's Garth Burns and Martin McClellan, Angus McCloud, and there's the old boat, the Yoo-Hoo. That's one of the cabins. That's cabin 4 that was built entirely by the boys in camp. This tree, Lynn Stewart and the fellows were taking this tree down, and the tree gave us a lot of trouble. We finally got it down, but not without a lot of worrying. Seems to me that must be a fraternity sorority camp at the start of the camp. Things that are the girls had organized a sorority and decided to come out there to help us open the camp. And there's Amelia Hanna Oliver now, Martin McClellan up on top of the piling. This is a Jamieson girl from Rossland, Joan Harris, Maidment. There's the voice coming out today. It's Donald MacDonald, now Judge MacDonald of Kamloops. This is putting up a basketball board. These pictures would be running in 1940, well, we'll be running around 1939, 1940. There's McTeer there, Martin McCloud, and the leaders of these fellows here all went into the services. 1939, 1940, a number of our best leaders were already in the services. I don't know whether this is a picture or not. There's one of these scenes where this is a cross-country run, and two of the fellows come around the corner there, and one bumped the other, and he went way off, heading off into the bush. There's Harold Moan. Poor Harold. Everybody was behind him, though. He was a very backward youngster. Cheer him for everything he did. He would get big cheers to encourage him. There's Don McTeer. Unfortunately, it's his father that's being buried tomorrow. Jimmy Douglas, Rossland. There's Harold Moan. Everybody said wait for him to take that dive. He really couldn't swim. and he was determined that he was going to dive off from one corner. There's Pop Smiley. Pop Smiley was the high school principal, and when the boys learned that he was coming to the camp as a leader, they wanted to know, gee, what do we got to say? Mr. Smiley, Robert Smiley, what are we going to do? And I said, I'll just leave it to you fellows to decide. And as he walked through the camp, Sid Horswell called her, hey Pop, come on over here and tell us what we should do here. And it stuck with him. It went back to the school. He became Pop Smiley around the school. There's Harold Moen. Yeah, he swam just across that 10 feet across the corner of the dock. Alistair McCloud, he has just beat the senior curling championship here in Trail. Seniors retired. There's George Hoover. George Hoover and his brother and Ernie Ball. We had to make sure that the three didn't sit on the same side of the bench at the table. It wouldn't hold them. Trick there was these boys here because really quite the experts in this softball game. The thing wasn't, it wouldn't be a game if one of them didn't hit the ball over the top of the cabin there. Jackie Gray lives over in, there's Cal Moen, there's Clara Hugh. And another train arrives. It was a sorry day when they took the trains away. That is Chris Sorensen. I think he owns the Super Value store. It's his daughter that was the Kimberley top skier. She was at the Can you imagine those cabins looking at them, the guy coming on telling you not enough air in them? That's what we had to put up with. There's Gordon Allen. Gordon became a minister and was unfortunately killed in a bad accident over at Moyie Lake. Something tells me that's Frank Wilby washing his socks. It is. Look at that trout swimming around there. There's nobody catching. Reverend Bill Selder coming into camp. You fellas were all born too soon. You could be on the sports cast now all night long. They show the aerobics. Robins don't go so fast, and I can tell you who's in those pictures. Martin McClellan in the doorway there. Russell Jones. He's a short, the nurse. That's 1940, that picture. That's Garth Barnes with a thing over, they call him Hairless Joe. There he is. I wish it was poor Garth now. Jackie Melville, Sorensen, Harris, Murray Harris. Billy Short, a nurse, a little girl. It's fine, but don't let the dishpan go under. You gotta, or you have to go and get it. This is the camp romance. This little guy was really too young to be at camp, so he spent all his time with a nurse's little girl. This is quite a thing, but when you do that wheelbarrow race and you're both blindfolded, it's much more fun. This is heading off for a picnic down at Ferguson's Point. Those that go down on the boat walk back the track. Those that walk the track down come back by row the boats back. Dick Tyson, Alan Temple, the romantic pair. And that's the two ministers. That's Reverend Silverwood, Anglican minister in Nelson. And you know, that man retired to Victoria, and he was living in an apartment in Victoria where a friend of mine was. And they got to know, and I couldn't go to Victoria without, I got a call to go and see him. A very remarkable man. That's a young people's camp. Molly, Agnes Elias, Man Mountain Ball, Ernie Ball. The girl in the blue, Margaret McCloud, I used to get on the company phone. She worked in a company store in Kimberley, and this is how we kept the business going between the camp, all over the company phone. Once in a while we get tangled in with a boss's conference or something, but Mrs. Kettlewell, the young people's camp. It's Helen Smith. She married an Anglican minister living in Quebec. Gordon Allen, in his Indian makeup, which got him in difficulties with the kitchen. The cook put his pants away up the top of that tree. Told him where they were the next morning. He had to spend all night without his pants. The old Yoo-hoo boat that we had. Humorous thing about that boat was that it was pretty leaky above the waterline. If you got too many people on the water, it just poured in through the upper seam. On one of these occasions, we had to put some of them off on the shore. That was Nora Alice, one of her study groups. We always blamed Alice Goddard for one of the things. She christened the Yoo-hoo with a bottle of pop, but she knocked a chunk of wood off the bow of the boat and the bottle didn't break. Amelia Hanna and Black Raisin. In those camps, girls' camps, there could be such persons as Hannah Buck or Jean Erskine, or Eileen MacDonald, Ruth Johnson, Norma Simpson, Ines Keller, Peggy Caldwell, Ruth Beckett, Dorothy Urquhart, and many of them that I can't get the names to. Ruth Lundy, the swimming instructor there. She was from Creston. Donny Kettlewell, testing the buoyancy of the tires. That's Eileen, what her name is now. I saw her just the other day, living in Rossland. And the girls, they did an awful lot of dancing and that. If they went anywhere, there was always a group of them, and this is one of the occasions showing how if they got a call to go to dinner, the cabin would come join up like that and come right down through the camp, all dancing their way down through the camp. And oftentimes Nora Alice would be out there with her violin playing for them. It was a very, very lively camp, that particular camp. It was a good staff. They had an excellent staff there. Yeah, this is some of their folk dancing that was going on there. There's the camp staff watching Nora Alice roll. And that's Jamieson and from Rossland. This is painting pine cones. That girl was McLean from Port Hill, Idaho. We had a brother in camp too. They came every year. Fort Hill, Idaho. That girl's got a hot iron there burning something. The way she's holding it. The girls were a lot more artistic than the boys when it came to, they would spend more time on these handcrafts and what. There's Billy Short stuck in there. When she appears, you know that that's 1940. Yeah, she was at the camp. Well, this is the boys repairing the roof of the storehouse. There was 18 inches of sand on that roof as a protection against fire when it was used as a powder magazine. But dampness got into the outer coating, the sand got damp, and the rot developed into the inner roof, so we had to take it all off. And this is a dramatization group, and this is putting on makeup. This is girls putting on makeup in this particular scene. And this one was a nuisance passenger on a bus. You wanted to ride along on the bus and you had the passenger beside you. That little girl in the front, she could be a nuisance anyway. Billy Short. This is the girls' sorority, and they're knitting squares for Afghans to be sent overseas. Phyllis Thompson in the front of that bunch there. Well, this is the girls that are starting to do some ballet swimming. It was almost an unheard of thing that when they were started to do that at camp. They didn't do too bad at it. Yeah, this is the pinwheel. And this is the initiation ceremony in the girls' sorority. The little gal on the front is the one I was talking about that loved to clown around. This is they went through a dance sequence first and then they there's Nora and her violin and Peggy Sproul with her. Nora Ellis taught in the Tadmac school. It's Peggy Dottermead in that, and McIntosh girl from Betty Atkinson, Richard Patmore, Mem Hilliard, that's Rosemary Fleming greeting them, Betty Agnew. There's the girl, Clowney. She was always in that oh, her name went from me right there. Thompson, Phyllis Thompson. Gertrude Patmore. She was a great leader. This is Jack Underwood in archery. After that picture, that's the last picture of him. He went into the services. Jerry Jerem was in the Marine Corps instructor in the South Pacific. There's the trail, the Camp Creek. Quite concerned lest this Alaska Creek business might upset the flow of that creek. Martin McCloud and Bill Dimock. That's flowing at high water. Gordon Harris, now an ice specialist in Vancouver. Betty Atkinson, who lives at Balfour. Cammy McKenzie, retired school teacher. Oh, he died. In fact, he died just a little while ago. His father was a school principal in Rossland. Martin McCloud, the banker's son. Who else is sleeping out there? There's Janet Dote. When left here, went to Kamloops and organized camping over in Kamloops. Bird's nest, birdhouse built by Mr. McKenzie, who also fell out of the tree and broke his leg. Rosemary Fleming, Mem Hilliard, she became a nurse. And the train comes in. There's Cam McKenzie, McCloud, Jack Steed. That's the train in with the trail kids. On one of these occasions, we had the priest that belonged up at Lourdes, and we had a little difficulty getting him back on the train. He thought he was at the right place. He wasn't easily persuaded to get back on the train again. No, this is the... That's Judge Wetmore now, Supreme Court judge in Vancouver. Martin McCloud, sawing this is the next day's wood supply. Bill Affleck. Garth Barnes. What's his name? He was quite a clown. Mac. This is Peeling Spuds. What was happening here is, you see, these fellows would line up their own sports day, and they'd find out what was required of them at the next day in chores, and so they'd have the whole camp doing their chores for them for the next day. That's how come the wood splitting and the potato peeling was going on. Obstacle race. Ernie Ball, school principal. As I've already said, he's now a tour guide in Vancouver. This is Foobaster, youngster from Kimberley, privilege of ringing the bell. Gordon Harris. There's the Barney Tier. He's starting off on a hike. On each of the highest points of the mountain right behind the camp is a cairn, and it's got the names of the kids at each camp that goes up there. It's Reverend Bill Selder and his wife. It's Archie McTeer. Harold Moen. Boy's waiting to go home. Jerry Jerem. Dick Tyson. We wanted to build the patio out in front of the lodge, and we had no wheelbarrows and so forth, so the kid got the bright idea of the long ladder, and there's a dishpan set in between the rungs, and each one dishpan's got filled with sand, and that's how they got them up from the beach up to the front of the lodge. The story there with the kid under the bed there fixing his blanket, because his bed was going up in the attic, and it was a must that the blanket had to go right around the meat underneath the bottom side of the bed. Herb Stovell was a Baptist minister, and he was a great asset to the camp. Sure, you can drink the water out of the lake. Ian McLeod, he's a Presbyterian minister. He was another good. They were all good leaders. We had no problems at all. Oh, we even had a wash day in the camp. This looks like it might be a treasure hunt. Somewhere in the middle of that should be Ken Dimock. Ken always liked the treasure hunts. There he is. Ken's looking for treasure hunts. He's always looking around to see where the leaders were watching. I don't know whether it's this treasure hunt or not, but Donald McDonald laid the trail, and he put one of the clues in a tree out in the water. So the kids, when they fixed him, they dunked him after they found the clue. This was another one of their inventions for a sports day. Carry that can full of water. Maybe this is the one where the kid gets bumped in, coming around that corner there. Cross country run. Yeah, see that? Whether that was done purposely or not, but it happened. Well, that's Kirker and Calder, two trail boys. And there's Jack Underwood again. That's the Ada Girl. That boat was taken off the lake and taken down to Lake Coeur d'Alene for training American sailors. they took all the big launches off of Kootenai Lake down to for training them down there. How much more on here? Thanks for a second. This is water sports. We're always, in any camp, girls or boys camps, it's always a big day when we had the water sports. We did have a number of boys trained for their Red Cross badges, and they had withstood the very cold water, and when the fellow came out to inspect them, he dove into the water and was going to show them exactly what he wanted them to do, and he climbed back on the water because it's too cold, and never did get it. And yet the kids had trained to tread water for 10 minutes and all that sort of thing. Kirker. That's a Hartley. Donny Cooper. Ian McCloud, the Presbyterian minister. It's Kenny Dimock there. Kenny liked that guy. There was another fellow there. We had a United Church minister who was lame. But boy, his lameness, his short leg, didn't affect him, and he'd take part in anything that was going on. There's Foster Hilliard, the minister. He was a minister in St. Paul's Trinity in Nelson. Jack Melville. McCloud. Not sure what. Oh, that's Hartley. A kid with a fish there. I forget what his name was. Some of these fellows that are appearing in these pictures right now, was their last camp because they were called up and went into the services. Many of them into the, now we have this is the young people's camp, and this is the Hilliard baby, who's at the organ. And so some of the chaps that we've referred to here are in these pictures, like Len Stewart and Sid Horswall and Jack Gray. Jack Gray was actually the first casualty from the Kootenays. Sid Horswell was not far behind him. And Bob Buey, Clay Kennedy, Len Stewart, Foxley brothers from, and Ted Cornfield, and Bob Ludlow. This is a young people's camp, and that is next to. This is taking down taking down one of the trees that's bug-ridden. And there's a number of trees out there right now that are bug-ridden and should be removed. Have been removed actually since there's Derek Groom from now living in Seattle. And there's the tree on its way down. Those senior fellows coming to a young people's camp were really quite handy in getting rid of some of the unwanted things around the camp. Dr. Lees of Trail was one of the camp directors for that. Reverend Ferguson from Nelson, Foster Hilliard, Dr. Endicott and Dr. Daly, quite prominent in the young people's camps. There's another. This is back in, where's that girls' camp? Well, in the girls' camps you will find such people as Frances Moran and Helen Patterson, Effie Morris, and Amelia Hanna, and there was a number of these people. And in the young people's camp that we had here a while ago, there's Reverend Murray Cameron and there's Reverend Gerald Ward and Mrs. Kettlewell, Mary Heddle, Edna Nelson, Gordon Stewart, Ted Cornfield, Doris Lemon, Mark McCloud, Elsie Robinson, Myra Ivinson. I mention these names, they may not come in the order that you see them here, but they were all really at camp. And this is a service in the girls' camp, and there was 6 nationalities in that one camp taking service there. But anyway, as I say, there was a girl from China, the girl from India, and we had in that camp you'd have Jean Erskine, Aileen MacDonald, Elaine McLean, Ruth Johnson, Louise Brody, Marion Clellan, Peggy Caldwell, Ruth Beckett, Dorothy Urquhart, Sheila Downey, Joan McIntosh, Isabel Twaddle. This is the little Fawcett boy there with his mother. Youngsters had a ball when they got the chance to come with their mother and just freelance around the camp, as long as it didn't get in anybody's way. Let's see what's on. Yeah, that's some more of that swimming, formation swimming that the girls were practicing on. Actually speaking, this picture should have been ahead of the other one. Somewhere must have got crossed up, but it was a very cold day when this picture was taken. I remember that, and it was very good of the girls to put on this performance to show for us that day so that we could have the picture. These senior girls were really very, very good in cooperation. How many hot dogs can you handle there, Phyllis? There's Elaine McLean from Port Hill. And that's Elva Kettlewell, and Janet Doubt. That's the proper way to eat watermelon. Among and some of the pictures there, well, I may have missed them. Some of the work that was being done out there was for like fraternity and sorority camps. There such women as Jill Dimock and Carol Falder and Marion Jackson, and then there was Lyle Armstrong and Lloyd Wilkinson, along with Ken Dimock and Merv Rowlands, who were fellows that all worked on these things. Yeah, some of the fraternity fellows coming out of the lodge after a meeting. Pop Smiley, Bob Morris, Bill Affleck, and some of the other people that might be that I might have missed in some of the pictures. If I mentioned Nora Ellis, then I should have mentioned Elsie Gansner. They were very close friends. And then Mr. and Mrs. Ferguson were contributors to the camp, and Helen Ferguson were among those who contributed to leadership in the camp. Now this is an interesting picture here. These fellows came in there and they swam into the dock and flipped themselves up onto the dock, and it was bottoms up when they came onto the dock, but it was done very hastily for various reasons. As we mentioned, these chaps that we lost to overseas, and they were among the finest fellows, leaders, boys in camp, and then as leaders. And we did lose heavily by having to suffer the loss of those fellows. Oh, that's a tree across the lake at the landing. I don't think that tree is still standing. Bill Dovey up in the back row there with his wife. There's Cal Moan in there. Cal went through the boys in camp right up to being a leader and director. Pop Smiley. And there's my own father right in the middle there. Came up and paid me a visit in the camp. There's Gordon Whiteside, who was quite a character in the camp. He's quite a character anywhere. Mention his name. Lots of people will have lots of memories about him. This is part of the potato peeling deal. They had to bring a pan of water up from the lake, and they were judged first of all on how much water they had in the pan. Looked like that fellow had a very bad potato there. Surprised with the footwear that they wear now, so much of it looks alike. And when we pulled one of these obstacle courses like this and all their shoes were piled in a heap, how quickly the shoes were found. we still don't think they all got their own shoes. Now we've gone to canoes, and the canoes that we have at the camp now were built by the boys in the school program in Nelson. They learned it in the school program at Stanley Humphrey School. We went out there and learned how to build these canoes, fiberglass canoes. Allen Temple. This is Mrs. Dovey, always giving orders. There's Bill Dovey, who's a fine chap. Just retired as a minister down in Quebec. Getting ready for one of the races. One of the boat races. It looked like one of the old boats that was built by Mr. Holland. Archery. Some of those bows were built right by the boys themselves. Some of them were built right here. Bows were made right here in Trail. They made them through the winter months. Took them out there and finished them up. There's my dad. One of Mr. McKenzie's swings. Another one of these water can races. Funny thing is that might happen in one camp, and it wouldn't appear again for a couple of years, and then somebody would think of it. It's one of the bigger camps. This is one of the treasure hunts that was laid around the trees out in the water. So he said, if we gotta get wet, you gotta get wet. So Donald McDonald, who laid the trail, was promptly dunked in the water. There he is, after he was dunked. Reverend Murray Cameron, from Rossland, some jousting. A penalty for high sticking there. I think everybody watching this game must be one of the championship games at the end of the camp. Wendy Robertson. Waiting for the train to go home. Donny McCloud is Bundy Robertson, Ruth Nelson, Dovey, Jack Steed, Jackie Gray, S. Roberts, Janet Dote, she and her husband went to Kamloops and did a very good job with getting a camp organized up there. Maureen McDonald, Maureen Kasler now. I don't know what these girls would say now if they had to go into the cabins with the wood shutters on. This is Helen Vance, one of the camp directors, a beautiful musician, organ or violin. She came from Revelstoke to the camp. There are girls going to a sunset service down in front of cabin 4, I think it was. Nora and her violin. Over the years, the campers have been very good about bringing their instruments at the camp. We've had trumpets, French horns. There's Sally Nelson, my father. came up to visit me and finally decided he could be more help than sitting around. It wasn't in his makeup to sit around and do nothing. Eileen Harris. Father used to have the tip-top store and trail here. Fronia Snyder from Kimberley. Husband was the minister over there, Affleck. She was a good leader. Donny Kettlewell. This girl from Kimberley with the bow. Another one from Kimberley. I forget what their names were. They were good campers. I trained them to do rescue work with them. There's Eileen McDonald, the clown. Her father was my boss on the hill. This was in the a family camp. That's in Endicott. Here's my dad going for a swim. It's 74. Australian crawl. I wish I could swim as good as he. That's his last swim. This guy here, Clarahue, a little blighter, I looked up from the beach one day and he was going down the ladder at the end of the dock, and I said, "Yeah, what do you think you're doing?" He says, "I'm going down to the bottom to see what's down there." I said, "You climb right back up to the top." Bob McCloud, he's up at Fort Saskatchewan now. This is Endicott. That was the start of family camps out there. Can't think what their name is. Father was agent for the Shell Oil. Jerry Jerem, Jackie Gray, now retired, living at Christina. I don't think he ever got any bigger than that. Let's see. Gordon Harris, Don Brown. Don Brown was a singer. And I mentioned earlier in the pictures of Joyce Maidment. He and Joyce Maidment were finalists in the vocal competition music festival one year. This is a girl who decided to wash her hair in the fraternity's for sorority camp. And the boys decided to give her hair a rinse. Trick photography. Martin McCloud, noted for his hairdo, always combing his hair. These fellows could think of more clown things to do than hopscotch. And the other thing that they would do out there was tin can cricket. looks like they... Wilby. The other one of Beth Angus. Frank Wilby doing a little reading magic. Very unfortunate. The war came along and broke up what was the making of an excellent young people's camp. That was, I recall, was cleaning the trails around the back of the lodge up to the greenhouse. This is cleaning up the grounds in the spring before the camp started, putting the bases in place. Denny Goddard cleaning the grass off the baselines. He found a bird's nest there. So he went in the bush and brought out a whole scraggly tree and laid it over the top of the bird's nest, and he said, the kids know you run around it to get to home plate until after that the birds are hatched. And the kids did it. There's been some very, very interesting scenes of watching birds hatched from some of those ground nests, particularly the sandpipers. There's the mowing. There's Alan. Jackie Underwood. Frank Wilby. Oh, that's a mowing too, with the watermelon. That looked like Hugh Urquhart in that druggist in Super Valley drugstore. This is one of the picnics, obviously. This is McNaughton. Now works for Riverview Oldsmobile. One of the bird's nests. The boys took great care of protecting anything like they found like that in the camp. Just the same thing as those very small babies that were shown in the camp. The boys wouldn't hesitate at all to go and see why one of the youngsters was crying and look after them until the mother was available if she was busy with something else around the camp. Here's the boy with the turtle. Where it came from, where it went, nobody knows. Wouldn't be a camp if they didn't bury somebody. Look like Bob Gray. It's another treasure hunt. Mrs. Robins. Making sure they don't pull all the stones out of the chimney. Dick Tyson, Ralph Stinson, Mrs. Lyons. Ray McCloud. Yeah, Bill Dimock sat down in front there. Ken Dimock right down in the front beside him. Denny Goddard. Oh, look at the fish. Who caught that one? I noticed that some of the boys are paddling the opposite direction to the guy beside him. survival. That red hair is. Time to go home. Some of the cloud effects you could get out there were really something. There's Francis Moran. There's another case there. That's Lois and a friend of ours from the coast. He's up here helping to clean up the camp. School teacher, Vancouver. Gordon Harris and Jack Steed. Who have been viewing and all the pictures through. It was built in 1934, and it was built to satisfy the requirements of the student Christian movement of Canada, of which Beverly Oden was quite prominent in its leadership. And this building was the only one of the buildings that was contracted out, and the poles in it were actually cut for say telephone or electric poles, and if you notice the corners of them, it's very, very unique, the dovetailing that was done by the men that worked on those buildings. And the people that used that building was built for came from Europe, and the principal speaker was a famous psychologist by the name of Fritz Krunkel. And some of you will remember the blackboard, which was a sheet of steel across one corner of the side of the lodge, was actually a door plate off the storehouse, and that stayed there for many years as a blackboard in the lodge. And the lodge was used several times by groups coming in from Toronto and all across Canada. SCM groups and student Christian camps were led by such people as Reverend Gerald Ward of Nelson and Beverly Oden, and as I have said, several foreign people brought in from across the country. In some of the pictures that have just gone by, there was such notables as some of the original campers were shown there. Gilbert Kay, Gordon Ellison, Dick Tyson, who were there in the camp, and if you noticed, they had a fire going there, they were burning the leaves that they had raked. And here we see them in the picture, a little clowning going on there. And these, Gil Kay, the tall fellow in the center, is an original camper. And there's Jerry Jerem, and Gil is always very prominent because he was so tall, head and shoulders above everybody else. And Gordon Ellison there, when they were raking the leaves and burned them there, they put on a little bit of an act that was supposed to be representative of the things that were going on in the Doukhobor colonies at the time. There's Gil Kay and Bob McIntosh, Dick Tyson leaving the camp. This is re-roofing the lodge. I think one Walter Smith was probably on one end of that ladder. This looks like a hike to the top of, starting off at the top of the mountain. And this is looking across the Kokanee Peaks once you get up there. Among the people in those pictures are Jim Little, Bill Moore, and the boys were quite surprised that these two men made it up to the mountain. They figured they weren't going to do it. But there's Bill Moore and Jim Little just to one side. There's Ernie Ball, big fella in himself too. But that's up to the what was known as the intermediate cairn. And that's the one when you're at the end of the dock and you look up to the left side of the creek, you can see a rock sticking out of the bush there. This is just some contortionists going on. A little physical fitness. Ooh. These would be free periods, and any of the fellows were out, could suggest anything they wanted to see if anybody else could copy them. Some of these things were practiced as challenges for talent night, where they would challenge a fellow to do something or other. If the fellow paid attention to what was done here, they would know what was required of them. That's known as a hop, skip, and a jump, which is quite a tricky number. It's an Olympic sport, that one. Well, this is looks like some of the. Each cabin was asked. There was some logs lying around to make benches and one thing and another. Can't see the benches very well that they created, but there's Ken Dimock on the end there. The long and short of it, Ernie Ball and myself. And this is on the Pop Smiley group getting ready to leave. That was a good boat. Bob Gray. Another obstacle course. Find your shoes and put them back on again. Take them off. camp staff looking on. Oh, this is the leader's got a hold of Bob Gray and tied him all up. And this is his wife's coming in there trying to take them off and get the guys out. A little clown acting going on there. This is the totem pole, the wood door knockers that the boys were making. Well, this was a demonstration of how your jacket, if you pulled the drawstring on the bottom here, opened it up and jumped and then pulled it tight, it would fill with air and would keep you afloat for a while. This is a demonstration of the swimming for their badges that they never got. Yeah, they were showing the leg movements, the frog kick and the backstroke. Side stroke. That's the old breaststroke. Crawl, dive. Everybody's gone, the train's coming. Besides other things at camp, if you run at the right time, you get some terrific cloud exposures, scenic effects. The reason for the cloud effects like that is because of the Kootenai Glacier's location and the wind. Rollins. Oh, somebody had a flag with a train down. Alice Gray, Francis Moran, Lois Robbins. Somebody's sailboat out there. That's the start of the camp. The grass was all along. Launch coming in early one morning, bringing we had great cooperation from the ministers around the area. If we wanted one, they would come out for a morning and we would gladly go over and get them and return them. And the first years of the camp, the news editor of the Nelson News, Mr. Curry, he was a great believer in that pictures sold the paper. And so his staff of the Nelson News all had cameras, take pictures of kids. And he himself came out to the camp oftentimes. On one weekend he came out there and took some 80 pictures of the kids in the camp. And this is one of the ways about nature. This is a sandpiper's nest there. And the kids fenced it around and watched the hatching of those little birds. And how the mother looked after each one, took them away from the nest, took the shell somewhere else. So that within minutes after they were hatched, you couldn't find a trace of the shell or the bird. But coming back to Mr. Curry and his picture taking, one of the things that he loved to do when he was out there at the camp was to go put on his swimsuit and go out with his newspaper, and he could lay out there in the water with his pipe and read his newspaper out in the lake. And the kids really enjoyed watching him do that. And as I say, these ministers would come in and that, and it was nothing for Mr. Nixon would like to fish, and it'd be nothing for his wife to phone just about noon and say, "Has he gone fishing yet, or can I get him to come home right away?" That was another thing about coming home with all the senior boys we had in camp and jobs in short supply. If word came to the camp that a boy had a job waiting for him, he was allowed to leave the camp and go home for that job. This Erickson boy from Selmo just went by there. And then we had the Rotarians from Nelson, from Trail, visited the camp one day. That was their weekly adventure, and that was quite an experience. They taught us a few new things about baseball. Some of them didn't know much about baseball, and the one in particular, he was up to bat and he hit the ball and he said, "Run!" And so what's he do? He runs to third base instead of first base. So that the kids picked up a lesson from that and decided to try it every once in a while. This is the first aid class, and none other than, she is now rightfully called Dame Rose Comoric. That's her honored name. She has just been sort of knighted, as we say. In royalty, she would be a duchess. and she was out there and taught the boys first aid. I was talking to her just the other day. And that boat, the men were, that was the day the service club men donated the rowboats to the camp. So they decided to put on a race, each one paddling their own boat. And needless to say, they broke a few oars, which they gladly replaced. Reverend Rogers of the Anglican Church was the chairman of the camp committee on that occasion. I have a feeling that looked like Gordon Harris being pushed off the end of that log. Merv Rowlands and his cabin. That looks like Gordon Hunter's cabin. Donny Krause's. Tiger Milburn in there. Lauren Irwin. This is Tin Can Cricket in a fraternity camp.